Welcome, everybody. Hope you guys are ready for tonight. We're going to have a little special treat here with Daniel Enrique de León. Daniel is, I've known Daniel for quite a number of years. What was that? Oh, we're going to go. Daniel, welcome, everybody. Hope you guys I'm here in the back. Hold on.
You got the feedback. Got to mute that.
De León. Daniel I'm not sure where I'm getting it from. I've known Daniel for quite a number of years. What was that? Oh, we're going to go. Daniel, why am I getting it? Oh, I know where I'm getting it. Right? Hold on.
You got the feedback. Got to mute that.
Yeah, you got to mute it. Isn't that nice? There we go. I got it. Sorry. There we go. I'm like, why is there background looping? All right, guys. I'm Bill Lindsay with Xencelabs. I want to appreciate you guys coming and taking a little time with us tonight. As you'll see here in a second, Daniel is been doing some amazing stuff. I've known Daniel for many years. He's worked for the likes of Disney, Lucasfilms, Jurassic World, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, the Digital Domain. This goes on. Dropbox, Sight and Sound Theaters, which that's a fun one we'll talk about at the end. PDP and many others. So Daniel he's based in Los Angeles area, and he has just been amazing. Matter of fact, it's amazing. I would put Daniel in a class up by himself as far as self-promoters go. We'd be at a trade show and Daniel would walk around with a gigantic raptor. I mean, it's just like, he'll show it to you in a minute, but it's funny. Even the last time, the figure that's behind him off his right shoulder was, I think, strapped to his back, wasn't it? It was like
Trico.
Yeah. So enjoy this, guys. Daniel's a lot of fun to listen to, and we'll go ahead and take a look and learn a little bit about ZBrush as we do this and some of the stuff that he has worked on and how he came to go about doing it. So Daniel, with that, I'm shutting off my camera and turning it over to you.
Okay. We are at 99% on this video. I was trying to render in time.
You can talk for a minute.
For
Show
this.
that raptor. Where's that raptor?
It should be right here. If I can not knock over anything else that I got awkwardly placed. This is old. This has been with me for years now, and it's been beat up from going to I don't know how many trade shows. Yeah, but I haven't really cared to reprint it just because of time and whatever. And it's funny, like you're so close to any project after a while to doing the same thing over and over, and people adoring it. It's always nice to hear nice words about it, but as an artist, you kind of get tired of doing the same thing all the time and carrying it around as well. So this is definitely something that it's been just sitting on a shelf collecting dust for quite some time. But I can actually share the digital version of this too, just so people can see a little bit better, because this is kind of blown out, I think, from the light and whatever. But let me see if I can share screen. And
Daniel, this is all ZBrush, right? You're like all these images that you're going to be showing us is all ZBrush.
Yes, sir. That is correct. Okay. So we're going to go to there.
Oh, share your screen. There you go. You got it.
Okay.
Ooh, what is this one?
That's the Quiet Place alien. That's coming in the video that we're gonna have come through here in a minute, but it's still at 99.9%. I don't know why it hasn't just completed. Yeah. But here is this guy that you just saw earlier. And this is before it's been all segmented and chopped up to be printed in different parts. But yeah, these were a lot of work and a lot of fun. Jurassic Park is one of my favorite films of all time. It made a huge impression on me as a kid, and of course, the raptors were some of my favorites. But I love all those dinosaurs. All those animals are just incredible. So this was just a personal piece, something fun that I just loved and wanted to make crazy accurate to the films, because I hadn't really seen anything other than the maquettes that they had molded from Stan Winston, which were, of course, a little different from the final film version, because everything had to change a little bit in proportions and sculptural detail. And so a lot of things changed between the maquette that's smaller, like this size, versus the full-size animatronics and suits that they had. So I wanted to make something faithful to the actual on-screen raptors. So I spent, I don't know, probably 50 hours or so just sculpting every single major wrinkle and crease and fold, and just an insane amount of attention to detail and time. So yeah, there's something I was proud of, and I'm still proud of them, but yeah, after doing a million different Raptors and getting commissioned to do it for guys from ILM and other places, I mean, I've had my fill. So unless they want to hire me to work on some films or whatever, I'm kind of Raptored out for a little bit.
If you were to do a Raptor now, you said it took 50 hours for this one. If you were to do a Raptor now, how quickly would you be able to do it?
I mean, it's probably a little bit faster, but it's still, if we're talking from scratch, you know, it would still be a fair amount of time, just because it's hard to speed up that manual effort. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really take like a stamped, you know, alpha or something like a texture and just repeat it, because then, you know, the human eye catches all that repetition very easily. Yeah. So, you know, it's a lot of manual work. It's just a lot of hand touching of everything, so that it has that natural, organic, kind of random, you know, look to everything.
Very cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that video was just sitting there at 99%. I really wanted to show everybody this
well, we can talk, we can come back to it.
Negative. Yeah. I don't know, do you want me to just move on to something else of choice, or do you have a particular piece you'd like to move on to next?
Well, obviously one of my favorites is the Cupid and Psyche.
Cupid Psyche,
yeah, sitting on the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there it is.
Bring that one up to the camera. That was kind of cool when you did that.
Okay, one sec. I guess I've got to switch over to the camera now, right? And we want to enlarge the camera now?
No, you're good. You're good. Just leave it there. That's fine.
Okay.
Daniel, how do you get these things out? I mean, you're using obviously a 3D printer.
Yes, sir.
How long does it take something to print something like that?
Man, this again was I think over 100 hours of printing, if I'm not mistaken. This was a fair amount of work, fair amount of time too. Just because the scale. I mean, this thing is about, I think about 2 feet tall, or almost 2 feet tall. Probably 18 inches. I don't know, maybe something like that. Yeah. But yeah, it was just a big piece, you know. So the height takes a while when you have high resolution, because this was done on an FDM printer. It was or FFF printer, as they like to call it. I forget what that stands for. I remember FDM stands for fused deposition modeling, but it's the older, I guess more common type of 3D printers that people are probably familiar with. That they have it's a reductionist way of putting it, but like a glorified hot glue gun on a gantry. You know, you have a big spool of plastic that goes through a hot end, and then that hot end's on a gantry that's computer controlled and gets all the data from your model, and then just extrudes that, you know, plastic that's heated, liquefied almost, and then it just does all the slices until it reaches the top of a piece. And this definitely took a long time, because I decided to do the highest res that I think the printer could do, or maybe the medium version. I don't know, but it still took forever. And so, yeah, this is a take on Antonio Canova's original piece by the same name, you know, Cupid Reviving Psyche, or Psyche Revived by Cupid's Kiss. It's in the Louvre, and I think they've made other copies of it. So you have other marble statues of the same thing in other museums. But it was just a piece that I found really inspirational and really beautiful. And I love how it was just a visually just an incredible, striking, romantic, really epic piece. But it was also, I thought, I want to modernize it a little bit, because there's such a more just juvenile look to the characters, to the people. Especially Cupid looks much more like androgynous and like a younger boy, while Psyche basically looked like an adult woman. So it just felt a little disbalanced. It felt a little weird from the original, even though it's really beautiful. So I figured I wanted to accentuate the genders and really make the man masculine and make Psyche very feminine and beautiful. And so this is kind of my sort of take on that. And in the original, he's pretty much groping her, and I figured, well, let's make it. He's descended into Hades, into hell, to save her. So I'm like, maybe you'd go down with a weapon. Maybe his bow would make a lot more sense. So in his left hand, I have his bow, his quivers on his left hip, like in the original. But that's the funny thing, is the original, he doesn't have a bow, he just has a quiver. I'm like, well, how are you firing the arrows, man? So so I figured I'd make this really cool bow with like some blades on it, just make it like more like a 300 version of this story, right? Kind of like flesh it out. So it was a really fun piece, and I oops, not the keyboard, really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was a personal creative challenge, and something that I was able to give a live kind of master.
So you did that just because?
Yeah, I mean, I had an opportunity to do a masterclass on 3D printing, so I was already working on this and already had this on my back catalog of different projects I wanted to do. But Ultimaker reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to do a masterclass with us at Wacom headquarters over in Portland?"
With who?
With the name who should not be named.
That's right.
The company who should not be named. But yeah, but that's where it happened. That's where the masterclass was. So yeah, so I did a little masterclass on how to segment your prints for 3D printing on a build volume that wouldn't accommodate the scale of what you want to do. And so this was kind of a whole lesson on that and how to.
How many pieces is that actually that you printed out?
I forget. I want to say it's like 26.
26 pieces.
I think. Wow. Maybe more. I think it might be almost double that when you consider all the pins, because there's a lot of pins. If you guys are still seeing my my ZBrush screen, right?
Yeah, see both.
Okay, so where is this? Find it here in the stack. There were, yeah. So there you can see right here. Just zoom in on this quick just to show you, and these are all proportional.
You can put the 3D print down. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Juggling everything here at the same time.
Don't operate.
So yeah, here you go. This is the let's grab everything here that I need. Yeah, this was the these are the pins that go throughout the entire piece here. So if I do transparency or solo this out, you can see how it's broken down. And this is also just it's a bit of an engineering nightmare a little bit. This was again done really quickly. I think I did this over the course of like 3 or 4 days, like from scratch, like from nothing. So it was like an incredible amount of work in a really short amount of time. Pretty much locked myself in a hotel room in Portland the days before I was supposed to go on, and just sort of hammered this out as fast as I could. So that's like the main centerpiece, of course. That's the main chunk. And then, all these other parts just have to be, engineered, figured out, like how they'll print. So of course the flat end, these really flat ends are how it prints, and then it just goes through the printer. Actually, this might have printed correctly. This might have actually printed like that, if I'm not mistaken, that way or this way. I don't remember exactly, but either way, yeah, it's just, with 3D printing, you're both artist and engineer. A lot of times you have to look at things in different ways, and it's not just fun. I mean, like, you go through the 2 phases of like sculpt whatever you want or create whatever you want, and then you have to also think about logistically, then how can this actually be created in the real world, where gravity and small amounts of bits of material can only be suspended for so long. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have supports, and there's a lot of other elements you have to consider when you're when you're doing this.
So those pins that you had sitting in the front of the statue, were those the pieces that actually go in between those little gaps?
Yeah, exactly. They lock into those holes that you saw throughout, the cavities you saw with that throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So 2 different sizes. The large ones obviously for all the main parts, and then the small ones were really just for the wings here, because you need to have smaller areas, of course. Yeah. So yeah. So it's just a big engineering feat.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I'm working on a sequel, so I don't have this printed, but I wanted to continue the idea of the story, because I love a good story. So this is this new piece that I'm working on that will be printed as well, and this will be printed on the Formlabs Form 3. It's nearly done. I mean, there's still some anatomy details and whatnot that need to be touched up for sure. But yeah, this is kind of like their takeoff, I guess you could say. So they're ascent now from hell. They're ascent from Hades. Yeah, so and it'll be a fun piece to actually have printed, because there's going to be a good illusion of actual flight. Now, I always love having things that look like there's some motion or emotion to them, and this of course has both. But this is a piece that'll be suspended by just 3 delicate points. 2 wings touching the dust cloud, I guess you could say, that's billowing, or ash below them, and then their bond here is what kind of is like the main structural point that'll be kind of all welded together when it's printed. Right.
So I got a couple of really big questions here with this piece you're looking at right now.
Okay.
First one I'll ask, actually the second question I'll ask first, which is, how do you study the gravity of the bodies in these pictures? So like the just the motion, and everything, where it's obviously up in the air. How did you do that?
I'm not sure. Like, wait, how do I study the gravity? What do you mean exactly?
So they're obviously, it's not, you couldn't have a model get in that position.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So how are you able to just render? I mean, just create that way. What was your
Just
reference?
none really. I mean, I just look at good anatomy books for like artists in our, anatomies for artists or whatever, and just background of medicine. So I'm really comfortable with the human form. So I have a pretty good understanding of just the limits and how far you can push everything before it starts to break or look incorrect. And that just comes from years of just looking at the human body and just studying that from both medical, but also then of course artistic, and years of life drawing. Like back in college, I double majored my last year and a half in fine art with a focus in visual communication and in pre-med in biology, and worked in a hospital for 2 years in the ER. So really around a lot of naked people for a lot of time. And life drawing, of course, you have real life models, men and women sitting there, usually nude, or maybe with like a sash of some kind, or some sort of, drapery of cloth or something. But usually it's, you're studying the human form, and you get people of all kinds. You get people in really great shape, you get people who are out of shape. But that helps you understand as the needs go in the artistic world, which is vast, especially in entertainment. You need to know all kinds of body types, not just the ones that are just super ripped and fit, but those who are imperfect or overweight, or even missing an arm or a leg or something. Like there's so much variety. So yeah, so that helped, I guess. And then it was simply just taking a human base mesh right into ZBrush, and then just posing it as I saw in my head, sketching out some ideas really quickly, maybe just in 2D, just to kind of get the pose right very quickly in my mind, just get something out. But I saw it pretty clearly in my head, like not all the insane detail of like, oh, the cloth is going to look exactly like this, and not to that degree, but that's something that's sort of like a fun course of discovery as you're working on something like this, is to happy accidents, to stumble across different things. And ZBrush recently introduced a dynamics cloth simulation algorithm into their software. So that's where I got a lot of these, again, like unpredictable kind of kind of some happy accidents, random folds and curls and whatnot. So there's a lot of those cool elements here that and things might still be tweaked, of course. Like I'm not calling this done yet at all, or that it's perfect by any means, because I'm sure there'll be anatomists out there who can see all kinds of problems here still. But but in general, it's it's definitely in the range and the ballpark where I want to go. And now this is more the refinement stage. This is where you start fixing forms and just really perfecting it. He still needs his underwear, but
so speaking of refining and
yeah,
getting ready to do this, one of the questions, actually Morgan asked this, how do you, can you really cover the process? And again, it may be just a verbal version, because I'm not sure if this piece is done yet, ready for this, but how do you move this and prep it for 3D printing? That's a really good question.
How do I move it?
Or how do you set this up for 3D printing? I mean,
setting it up. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the previous one, the previous version, you showed us where the segments are, but how do you determine where those segments are? And how do you figure out, okay, yeah, this needs to be its own segment? Yeah,
that's a pretty straightforward process. So you have to understand what your build volume is. So you have to know what printer you want to print it on first, right? Of course. So then that dictates the limits, right? The boundaries of the volume of the space you have to print within. Once you have that information, which you can just find on any printer's website usually, or in the instruction manual, you create a cube, a box. It's very simple, just whatever, how many points it takes to create a cube, and just bring that into ZBrush, size it up maybe in Maya, or you can do it in ZBrush, and then use that as what will dictate the amount of pieces that it will have to be segmented into. And then you always have to leave like a buffer, so you can't just make it go right up to the all whatever 8 walls, right? You got to have is it 16, whatever, 12, whatever. You need to have the right amount of extra space for supports, because there's going to have to be a certain amount of elevation or separation from the build platform, whether it's on an FDM machine or on a well, maybe not so much on an FDM machine, I guess, but definitely on a Form 3. You're going to have like usually some rafts, which are just like a base coating of plastic that has like a lip on it, so you can pop it off easier. And then they grow supports from that to then support any overhangs that are beyond like 80 some degrees. I usually try to push it almost to 90. So I try to orient things where they grow like a tree. So if it's self-supporting like a tree, you don't really need to have supports that are just other pieces of filament or not, I'm sorry, or resin that's, you know, brought to meet a certain point. So if you have something that it's coming out to, let's talk vertically, I guess, instead of upside, because a Form 3 prints upside down. So you have to think in reverse there. But generally the idea with 3D printing is if something is moving up and then it starts to go out to a sharper and sharper degree, when it gets closer to 90 degrees, if you're creating something that's using material that's going to start hanging out into midair, you're going to have something else to come to meet that point so that it's supported, so it's able to keep moving and being printed in that, you know, very harsh angle. So those are always the other things you have to take into consideration when you're looking at the cube and moving that box around that volume to determine, you know, where you're going to segment all these different parts. And so then that goes hand in hand, of course, with, you know, how big do you want this thing to be? Of course, you can print the whole thing in one containment area, but then it would be like pretty small, right? But if you have time, that's the other thing. Of course, all this takes time. Printing takes time. If you have the time and you have the patience to segment, right, to move that box all around and chop it up where you need to, then, you know, you can have a piece like that one where it's bigger and, you know, and then you just.
Yeah, we'll talk about bigger toward the end here with the gigantic print. Or gigantic statue, shall we say.
For sure.
Another question that came up was, what's your favorite printer that you use?
Oh, definitely the Form 3. Yeah, hands down.
Definitely.
I mean, it's
not even the question, huh?
No, there's really not much competition in that point. At this point, I think it's for now for it's that in that perfect sweet spot where it's really like a prosumer, not just a consumer type of product, meaning it's something that professionals would usually use, and they do use in all over different industries. But especially in the arts, you know, I think probably the only one that would take it over it for me that would still be in a near price range, but it's a bit more expensive, would be the Form 3L, which is the large version, right? Which is big enough that you can print like an entire motorcycle helmet in one go. So it could print pretty much that whole piece. I keep pointing in the wrong direction. That whole piece could be printed in it. But that's, you know, it's 10 grand, and I probably will pick one up eventually, but it's like buying a car, you know what I mean? Like a cheap car. It's not necessarily like an everyday purchase. So it's something that I'm
not like buying a Tesla.
Not like buying, well, that's a little bit more, yeah, but but it's a Tesla of 3D printers, we'll put it that way. But that's Form Labs they've been good to me, and they really just create great products, and that's why I love using their printers. Form Labs is leading the way with that prosumer level, where still even the quality you get out of regular Form 3, you know, which is basically like I think it's like 7 by 6 by 6, I think is the build volume. The quality you get out of it, though, no matter what, it's just insane. It's really incredible, and it easily competes with a lot of the top tier printers by like Stratasys, where they get to print in color in the higher end pieces, you know, whatever. They have a different type of process that's a marriage between FDM and SLA, which, you know, you have like a thicker viscosity resin that's extruded, but then also it's extruded from inkjet sort of tubules that then, you know, come down off of a head that it's the size of like an old copier machine. Like if you go to Office Depot or whatever, Office Max, and you have these massive copier machines, that's like the J750 or whatever. That's a huge, massive printer that really still has like funny, because the machine is huge, but then you actually have a build volume that's probably like 3 feet by, I forget, like 4 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, something like that. So it's still like, it's a massive machine for like a large area, but it's still like not, you know, it's not like massive. Another big company that does real like massive similar printing as well, hence the name. But you can print a car, like a full-sized real car in these printers, you know. So there's these tiers, right? These tiers of accessibility where you can, if you have the money and the space, you can print all kinds of crazy huge things at home or in a warehouse.
Your money, right? Have the money.
Yeah, money. That's money's answers a lot of things. It fixes a lot of problems.
So I want to move on a little bit. Noticing that there's these glowing eyes over I think it's your right shoulder. These glowing eyes and that's actually a 3D print, isn't it?
It is. That's Trico. So I'm a huge fan of The Last Guardian, which is this beautiful game by Sony. And if you look on the ZBrush screen, you can see here, this is just a close-up of the face.
Oh yeah.
And that's just a one-to-one of what's right there. I would bring it over, but I just, it's kind of awkward.
It's plugged in, yeah.
So, yeah.
It's obviously plugged in, it's glowing.
Battery powered though, actually, but yeah. Yeah, the LEDs. So I taught myself some electronics there, and just some basic information on how to wire up LEDs and circuits and whatnot. So it was a fun, yeah, it was just a fun exercise and just expanding my skill sets a little bit more. And yeah, so figuring that out. But yeah, this was a massive undertaking. This was again a personal passion project that took about on and off 2 years of diligent work. But it wasn't so much that time frame wasn't so much that it was spent all on this. Of course, I was working full time for different studios throughout those 2 years. So that's, you know, more than 8 hours a day taken up by full-time work. And then a lot of days where I'm just dead tired and I just can't stare at a screen any longer, had no motivation to work on it. So there was a lot of delays in, like, mentally I wanted it to be done, but then, you know, there's the physical part where your body just needs to rest. And so that's where I just said, nah. So it took a while, but definitely proud of it. This is the only prototype that I've ever printed of it. But I definitely want to refine just a few areas. Like there's areas here you can see, like with the feathers and whatever. I'm super perfectionist, so I see all my problems, right? All my flaws and things. But there's areas I want to improve, and even how certain things were segmented, I want to fix those things or change them. But overall, I'm you know, super happy with the way it turned out. I'm definitely just I'm grateful to see, like, when you apply yourself, if you have a vision for something in general, this is a good message, I think, for all artists. If you know what you're capable of, and all it's going to take is time, sometimes money too, right? Like I worked on this originally, I made this all on a pretty weak computer, but ZBrush is amazing to be able to have just incredible amounts of heavy, dense models work on really underpowered machines. So I worked on this over the course of having a pretty weak machine, but just kept plugging away, you know, and eventually it was finished. But if you know what you're capable of, and you have the time and the effort and the diligence, the perseverance to keep going, you can produce amazing things. It's just, you know, mankind has shown that over and over again with anything. It may seem insurmountable from the beginning, but eventually you're going to get there if you just keep going. And I'm definitely not someone who's a quitter. So I just, you know, so yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that obviously this was kind of a passion that you're working on. One of the questions came up, how did you, obviously you're doing the, day job. How did your mindset change going from one kind of modeling to another, like to come back and work on this?
I'm not sure. I mean,
hard to do, or were you able to actually achieve that because this was a passion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, is simply when you have such a deep love and affinity for something, hardships, it's a labor of love, right? Like the hardships fade away eventually, and then you're happy with the result, or what you're, you know, gaining or seeing come from the efforts you're putting in. So I guess you know, it's different modeling, yeah, because like production modeling for movies is completely different than something for 3D printing. They might have a similar base point, you know, where you're starting with a mesh that's a base mesh, right? And then you're modeling and sculpting to a certain degree. But then even like this, with the thing being covered in feathers, these are physical feathers, and that's completely different than using something like XGen or Yeti, you know, or whatever other software you have out there that is dedicated to creating hair, fur, feathers, that kind of thing. Because those are just, you know, infinitesimally, like, just, they're not real volume so much. So this has to be like able to be touched, like actual tangible, mass. So like this is a great, interesting example of what you can do on the Form 3 flexible, like really flexible resin.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible. And this is all intact. This is all one piece. Wow. So this is the exact same wing from one of his wings, her wing, whatever. And all the feathers came out for the most part. I mean, you can see some of the attachment points for the supports there, but yeah, it's still, so you had to be able to have some sort of mass to everything, to the feathers. Unlike in a film, you would have none of this. You wouldn't be able to print what you make in a film. You'd have to remake all the feathers like this. So yeah, so
Is that your print for Trico 2? Is that the second version?
Maybe.
Soft rubber or soft
Maybe.
plastic?
That was my original idea. It was way back when I first came up with the idea of making this as a print. I thought it would be so cool to have the feathers be flexible, but it's not the ideal because feathers aren't really that flexible. They're not floppy, of course. They have to have rigidity to fly, to function. So it would have to almost be a marriage. I mean, an insanely impossible marriage between the two, because I'd almost have to have each shaft of each feather be rigid, and then could have the extra bristles. I don't know what the right terminology is. I forget what they're called, but the strands that form the feather, these hairs, basically have that be softer. And that would be too, that's going too far for me to have to insert needle like shafts into every feather. No, that's it. No, I'm done. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I might still try in flexible, just to have like a skin, just to pull the whole thing over like a really smooth, because that's literally how this model is made. I can see if I can show you guys quick. Just some cool little insight. So here's like the feathers you can see inserting into not the actual body, but a duplicate of the body. And so you can see it's like a shell, and then you have all the feathers inserting into the skin, just like it would in a real animal, to allow them to attach realistically, but then also that gives it the realistic look. Because if I just create these huge chunky blocks where they all melted together when they come close to the surface of the skin, it would break the illusion if you start looking at it too closely. So I love to go for that kind of just insane level of detail, and just having that insane level of care for something where you don't see you try not to see the seams, no pun intended, but like you don't see it just, it looks like an animal that was almost a spray painted gray. Like that's what I'm going for, is that level of just realism and the delicate touch that is not common. I think a lot of people won't have the patience to do that, but I do. So here you go. Like here's another example. If I use polygroups, so you can see just all the separate meshes that were hand placed. I mean, a lot of this could be arrayed originally, and that's what I did, was a certain type of arrayment using nano mesh in ZBrush to place them in general, and then get polarity, so that they would be flowing all in the same direction. But then after that, it was a lot of hand touching, because the computer doesn't know that you don't want these meshes to intersect, to interpenetrate, where the like two feathers are like going through each other like this or whatever. So you have to go in here and just hand touch everything. And even now I'm like, oh, I could probably add some more feathers in here, make it a little bit denser, add some more realism to it. And that's one of the benefits of just playing the long game, of having a vision for something like long term and not giving up or not being depressed by it. Is to be able to come back to these files and be able to touch them again and say, wow, well, I'm going to print the next version of this that I want to give as gifts to the guys who created the game. The music composer has been a very kind friend, and sound designer is a good buddy of mine, very close actually now. I mean, we chat a fair amount. And then the creator of the game, who I met once, and super nice guy from my interactions. So there are three of them that I want to give as gifts. But now, having experienced the trauma of printing the first one, I know the pitfalls to avoid, and also what to improve and how to improve it with minimal amount of pain at this point. So like even this split here where the head is, so I could get all the lenses of the eyes and the LEDs in there. I figured out a much better way so that this can then be whole. So the face can be just one piece and not have to look like it had a lobotomy. So then I can just insert everything through the neck. And then the feathers do this beautiful job of covering up the seam, where you never even would know where one part ends and one part begins, because the feathers give you that cheat, really. So yeah, but there's just a lot of lessons I think I learned from this, and that I think a lot of people can learn from it too, is that having patience, being perseverant, and then also looking at what you learn from your experiences and doing something. And if you have a chance to revisit it, it's like people love to do in the game industry and the movies, like remake something, make it better. Hopefully that's the whole point, improving something from where it was to where it is now, and how technology has, grown and afforded you to have more abilities or more options for things.
So speaking of the working in studios, how's that video coming? Is it make it, or is it still at 99.9%?
It's still hanging. I'm looking at it right now. It's like it's still hanging at 99. I don't know why, because then I clicked on cancel, and it said, "Are you sure you want to cancel?" And I'm like, well, why isn't it completing? Dang it! So let me close it.
A little bit about one of the movies you worked on recently. What was you had that character up at the very, very beginning?
Oh yeah, the alien. Yeah. I wish I worked on that film. I would have loved to have, but I did wind up giving a print of this to John Krasinski, the director of A Quiet Place, And that was really cool. It was great to meet him. And I only wish I was able to give him this large version. So right here to my left, this is the version he got. And I'm very sad that it was just this small little
Size.
paperweight. Yeah. But it was, again, this is what I mentioned earlier. Time is always against you when it comes to 3D printing. Unless you just have as much time as you need. And, but this case, I was rushing to get this done. And this took about, I don't know, 50, 60 hours of work as well, compressed into like less than a week of time. So I was just killing myself trying to get this done in time because I knew there was going to be a premiere and I knew where he was going to be. So I knew I'd have a chance to ask a question at the live Q&A after the premiere of the film. And that's where I also was like, hey, can I give you something? But this is the scale, at least, that I would have been happier to give him, which is...
Remember what I said at the beginning about self-promoter? I mean, Daniel is master at it.
I try. Well, it's not even though I go after what I want, I guess, in life. I go after what I love or what I appreciate, then I try to glorify it in some way.
Well, I remember we were at a trade show and we were just sitting at one of the parties, and you figured out that there was a pretty predominant director there, and you wanted to get introduced. And next thing I know, you're talking to him. And I'm like going, oh my gosh, how do you do that?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I guess the thing is, don't be afraid to reach out and talk to people.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell everybody. Like I do a lot of streaming for Pixelogic for ZBrush. So basically like twice a month, I do it bi-weekly, twice a month, I'll be online for them and showing my process of how I work, and I do personal projects on there. So like, for example, this is a great example of that. I'm a huge Matrix fan, if you can't tell from the massive poster that I have behind me.
Poster that's alive behind you?
Yeah, the LEDs, yep. One of 300 that was ever made. And I put in the LEDs, but otherwise it's this beautiful lenticular. Just everyone knows that Matrix 4 is coming out now, so a little relevant. Just says free your mind at the top there. But yeah, I love the original film. The first film in particular is just one of my all-time favorite films. So there's this great scene near the end where Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, of course, does this awesome triple kick and knocks out the last security guard that's coming to stop them from going up the elevator and saving Morpheus. And so I've always seen that scene, and they do this quick cut from when he's at the peak of his jump, and then his leg is going into the guy's head, and they crop really close to that guy getting hit in the head, and then they cut back to the wide shot of him landing and the guy flipping around. And I always thought that moment of impact would look incredible as a statue, and no one has ever done anything close to that with the property. So I said, F it, I'm just going to do it myself because no one else is doing it, and no one else is going to do it right, and I have the patience and the fortitude to get it done. And the means. So I figured, screw it, I'm going to do it. So that's what I've been working on. And the primary focus, of course, the main important part is the head, right? The face, the likeness. So there's a certain level of importance just being resourceful, right? And understanding what you want to go for. So of course, looking at lots of images helps, but also finding out that someone had ripped the game from Cyberpunk, the popular game that he's in, and they for the game they scanned him. They did a 3D scan of his face. And so the neutral pose of the model in the game is as close as I'm going to get to having access to a 3D scan, which is very common and normal for the work I do at different studios. We always we get, facial scans like LiDAR or like just, laser scans of actors all the time. You get full body and or just face. And then you got to clean it up because it's like always artifacts. It always gets like the eyelashes cause some issues. Hair always causes issues. So you have to do it's great if you can get a skull cap on them, which most of the time you do. Sometimes they don't. And then you got to like clean it up. Or they do, but there's hair sticking out here or whatever, like things get melded from the ear to the skull because of the way the path of light casts a shadow and it doesn't get into crevice. There's always challenges. So regardless, we always work with scans and then we clean them up and then take a nice clean base mesh of a human being that you have hopefully you have on standby that's already UV'd and already has just great topology in all the right places. So then we use what's called ZWrap or wrap by R3DS, just amazing Russian company that made this incredible piece of software that's either a plugin for ZBrush or a standalone program, and allows you to take any base mesh, any mesh, doesn't have to be just humans, but I think it has certain algorithms that detect and understand like fingers, hands, face, eyes, all that, and will let you take a clean mesh that has all the good topology and it's ready to be animated, but it's just generic, and will then shrink wrap it to the exact form of the actor's face. So you could have the exact same base model that's then conformed into the, you know, Samuel L. Jackson and Neo, you know, whoever, you know. And so that's the kind of work that I do often for different companies and have. And so the same process is kind of what I applied here. It's like, oh, wow, we have a great game model, right? That's actually from a scan from his actual self. So I use that as a great base. And then that enabled me to really get a much better likeness of him, so that now the statue will have his accurate visage, you know, it'll look like him. And so they're still, you know, again, not perfect yet still. I mean, like, because I'm pushing an expression, probably tweak some things here and there, for sure. Granted, he'll be wearing glasses. That's going to be a new challenge for me, is how to print something so fragile, because even at 1/6 scale, you know, the head's only going to be about that big. So
yeah, the arm glass, yeah.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be a weird challenge, but I'm sure it can be figured out. So I'm going to try different approaches to it. But yeah, but then the rest of them will just be this really cool pose with that kick coming to the guy's head. So that'll be an interesting kind of trifecta of supports, just like with Cupid and Psyche earlier, like taking off. There'll be his trench coat will be flowing into the pillar behind him. So that'll be one area of support. His leg coming in contact with the guy's face will be the other area of support. And then that guy's head, of course, is connected to the rest of his body. And those two legs that will still be just about to leave the ground will be the ones that will also be supporting Keanu in midair. So it'll be a pretty epic, a pretty spectacular statue, I think. And I'm not saying that to praise myself. I just mean that shot in the film is so great. And I think no one has done a freeze frame of that and then did with the Matrix, though, like do a rotation of it. So now it'll be a freeze frame statue, you could say. You know what I mean? It's like a scene cut out of the film that you can look all the way around. So it's going to be a cool tribute piece to the Matrix that I plan to have done before the fourth one comes out. So again, yeah, self-promotion, but it's also just piggybacking on something that I deeply love, and it makes it that much easier to put in hard work. Yeah, like it's still painful, but it's still like glorious to get to the end of it and be like, yes, this is what I envisioned, and here it is.
All right, so we're getting close on time, and I want to talk about one more of your projects that you did.
Sure.
And it's tends to be my favorite, especially when you told me the story. I was like, are you kidding me? And that is the Moses story.
All right. Yeah.
You have that picture up? Do you want me to pull it up?
If you want to grab the picture, that'd be great, because I think I have the file here. But yeah, if you want to show the picture first, and then I can talk about the statue.
Oh, you got the file. Oh, you got the file. I'll let you start there, and then I'll take over after that one there.
Okay. Yeah. So this is what I did for Sight and Sound way back in like 2013. Yeah, so this was a really fun piece, one of many that I got to do for Sight and Sound, but this is the only one I can show you guys, and also everything else was like behind the entrance of the whole thing. So this was a piece that originally was conceived to be a massive statue based upon the poster that they had made for the show. So for those who don't know, Sight and Sound Theaters is this set of two theaters. One's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and the other one is in Branson, Missouri. And they're very similar to each other. And they have the same, I think, general areas when it comes to space in the rotunda. But for those who want to go to my website, you can see a lot of the process there, images in my portfolio if you go down to the middle of it, but showing how this whole thing came together. But the idea was that they wanted to have, this is what the poster looked like, except, you know, like there was Moses from the back and all this water rushing up in front of him. He's holding the staff just like this. And then it just has the title of Moses above him. So they said, we want to make a statue like this in the rotunda, but we need to have, you know, we want the whole thing. So again, you can walk around this whole statue and see everything about it. And so the president of the company, Josh Ank, just said directly to me, like, you're the new young blood, and I want you to make the statue, and just you and me, we'll just figure it out together. I was like, awesome.
I'm going to start sharing the images of that.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to take the screen over.
Okay.
So I'm going to find it. Here we go.
Yeah. So
continue your story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So eventually, after the whole process of, you know, going back and forth with him.
How big was this? How big was the original here? This ZBrush version?
I think it was about a foot tall, maybe even a little under. But that's a 3D printed, like it says on the bottom there, by Z-Corp 450, which and we all admitted to this too. It's a terrible printer. I mean, it prints in It's what's called an SLS printer. So it's selective laser sintering. So it uses a laser to sinter powder, to burn powder. And when you do that kind of printing for metal, it's amazing. It's incredibly strong, and you can actually you can blend between metals and create sort of alloys that have never existed before, because you can sinter between them. So you're basically welding metal at the micron level, like at microscopic level, which is insane. That's incredible. But for powder that turns into porcelain, it's a terrible idea. So this thing would break all the time. So I brought this as a sample to New York Comic Con. I think it was the first time I worked with the company that shall not be named, demoing. And this statue got beat up so much. I constantly walking around with super glue, like putting things back together, because it would just fracture like a porcelain doll, just snap here and there.
All right, so what did the president, he wanted you to do this? Where did it go from here? From this,
so from here, well, once it was finally we would look at all these different images of different men, older gentlemen like Anthony Hopkins and I don't know, maybe Charlton Heston. I don't know. Looked at a bunch of different actors, and we amalgamated face until we found the look that we wanted. Then we got the pose right, we got they did the whole flow of the cloak and everything. And once we all nailed that down, then they said, all right, let's print on this terrible printer, get this print out so we get a scale version of what it will look like. And then once you see it in real life and all right, we like how everything looks, that's what he wants. All right, good. Now let's go to the full size one, which is larger than life. So the final statue winds up being like around 16 plus, maybe 18 feet tall.
Yeah, it's cut up on screen right now.
Okay, and so the production of that, there's one step missing here, but then they'll go through what's called a CNC machine. So it's a computer numerical control, which really doesn't describe anything about it other than obviously a computer controls how a milling machine will mill out or carve out objects from whatever volume of material you want to give it. In this case, they use high density foam, which is just very packly dense styrofoam, so that you can retain a lot of detail. So the denser it is, the more it gets closer to like wood, right? And so you can get a lot of sculptural detail milled out of the face, which is what we use, high density foam for the face, and then lower density for the rest of the body where there's less detail and it's just larger, swaths of flow. So you can see that this gentleman on the ladder is using a knife and holding a smaller version of my model there to reference certain undercuts that CNC can't do, which is like really getting inside where you can 3D print any kind of crazy crevice, but with this machine there's a limit to how far it can get into nooks and crannies. So that's where hand touching has to come in again. After that whole bit of CNC is done, they will hard coat it. So it's liquid hot fiberglass. So it's like liquefied fiberglass that makes it look like chocolate. It's like covered in brown. And it then once it cools, it hardens. It'll have it's what you experience whenever you've gone to like a theme park and you sit in something that's like looks like a custom molded, sculpted, whatever, like teacup or something, and you knock on it, or like a merry-go-round, and you're on the horses, and you may knock on them or like bump them, and you hear like a clunk kind of sound, like a hollow kind of sound, but it still feels kind of like not metal, but something almost not ceramic, but that's fiberglass. It's liquid hot fiberglass that's cooled and hardened, and that's what you're sitting on or around. So the same process, like a theme park ride, is how this guy's sealed up. Then once that's done, then they go ahead and put in metal infrastructures inside so it won't fall over. And then they have someone go up on lifts and start painting the entire thing so it looks like stone, and texturing it that way. And then
I'll flip to the final with you guys still standing in front there.
Yeah.
So this lives inside of the Sight and Sound Theater, correct?
There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it did. I think they disassemble it when the new show comes in. So it'll probably be back up whenever they do Moses again. I don't know. I have no idea what their schedule is right now. But yeah, when they have the show going, that they'll have the statue. And I think they made another one to have in Missouri, their other sister theater. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was very cool. It's a very satisfying project to be able to see this thing in person and
Yeah, see something go from a foot tall to 16 and a half feet tall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a gigantic statue there.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, that was all my design, but then there's so many people that had to come in, of course, and help make this the reality. Gentleman at the very top, really the highest person there on the statue, I forget his name, it's been years, but I think it was Chris. He is a CNC engineer. So he and I would work together a lot on just talking about where do we segment it. Just like I was talking about for the 3D printer, you have to like figure out your volume and then cut within those limits. That's the same thing we have to do here, except on a much bigger scale. So we say, all right, what's the volume? You know, what's the limits? And so, all right, so then we measure everything to scale in the computer and say, all right, we got to cut it here, 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 and then do this weird thing here. So he and I work together a lot. Josh Ank is the gentleman to my right, screen left, right there in the center. And then you got some of the other modeling staff and scene shop people over there on the right side of the screen that I think one or two of them helped with like the logo, the text, you know, of Moses. And some of the other guys here on the left then also helped carve some of the rocks. They wanted to have a little bit more of a hand touch to the rocks for that. And yeah, so, and then some of those other people are painters as well. So yeah, a lot of collaborative and welders and, you know, so a bunch of different expertise that have come together to make it real. And if you want to come back to if you let me take over the screen again for 1 second, I want to show you something else that.
Go for it real quick, because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
2 minutes left.
Okay. Something cool that I came up with when I was working on that project that never came out in the end, unfortunately. But something that I would have loved to have done was my original idea for this whole thing. This is like 80% of it, but the last 20% was because they said just go nuts, just come up with whatever you think of regarding that moment of Moses. All they wanted was that pose and him on some sort of rocky area, but they didn't have anything else beyond that. And I was looking at the poster and thinking of like, I love Prince of Egypt, classic movie. I mean, amazing. And the moment when he's parting the Red Sea, I thought, well, why not have just an incredible amount of water, like what looks like water. So I came up with this idea of like blue acrylic plastic molded to the shape of massive waves coming up, and then putting LEDs, like a whole line of controlled LEDs that would kind of throb and flow with the emittance of light, so that it would give it like that look of caustics, you know, when you have light passing through water, but like walls of vertical water. So they loved the idea, but the price was just way too expensive for
the waves. Why did not that make it into the whole thing?
So this was the original. Size was too big, and it was like, okay, let's tone it down a little bit. So I went like this, and I'm like, yeah, it's a little too snaky. And then finally, this was kind of like the final design that I came up with. And I thought, man, just knowing now the scale, having seen that photo, knowing that a person standing here is probably right around this height, to be able to walk next to these massive, you know, like balls of water with light pouring through them, I just thought it would have been incredible. And they all loved the idea. They're just like, it's just too much money. It would have been just way too expensive. They're like, stop thinking so big. But that's how I operate, man. I love big, grand, detailed, well thought out visual stories. Like, I'm just a nut when it comes to that, which is why I'm moving into filmmaking. That's Unreal, and what I have planned in there is pretty exciting stuff. So it's an exciting time to be in the arts, an exciting time to be in 3D, and I think it's just going to get bigger and better from there.
I'm taking over real quick.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing with us all this fun, great stuff that you've done and been able to
my
do
pleasure.
with ZBrush.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely, we'll look forward to where you're going, and some more passionate projects that you have will seem to keep coming forward. So thank you guys. If you guys have more questions, Daniel will probably take a look at our YouTube channel and take a look and see what questions are there and be able to answer them as well. So feel free to throw some more stuff into the YouTube channel, or the comments there in the comments, and they'll appear on the YouTube channel. Again, you guys, thank you for attending. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. And this is again, the Bill Lindsay from Xencelabs. Hope you guys have a great rest of the afternoon. And we still got some more sessions tonight. I know I've got RC Iridio later on tonight too. So thank you guys again. Appreciate it, and talk to you guys soon.